You feel it in a quiet moment, a sudden surge of energy, a vision of a path that feels exactly right. For a few seconds, everything is clear. Then, the wait arrives. The excitement is replaced by a cold, persistent hesitation. You start to find reasons why it won't work. You convince yourself that the impulse was a mistake. Have you ever noticed how your deepest doubts seem to target your greatest inspirations? It is almost as if the more a choice excites you, the more effort your mind makes to dismantle it. This friction is not a random occurrence. It is a specific reaction. There is a hidden mechanism that triggers whenever you're about to shift your reality. This tension reveals something profound about how your identity maintains itself. We often treat this sudden hesitation as a sign of maturity or logic. We tell ourselves we are simply being realistic. But if you look closer, a strange pattern begins to emerge. This resistance doesn't appear when you are doing something mundane or repetitive. It only seems to arrive the moment you contemplate a version of yourself that is truly alive. Why does the flow vanish just as quickly as it arrives? You may have noticed this cycle repeating for years. One day you are fueled by a vivid sense of purpose, and the next you feel as though you are walking through deep water. We have been taught to see this as a personal failure or a lack of discipline. Yet something unusual happens in these moments of friction. This internal tug of war is actually a response to a specific type of energy. It is a sign that you have overlooked a fundamental rule about how your reality is constructed. Stay with me, because in a moment you will see why this pattern changes everything. This is where the pattern becomes clear. We tend to label these shifts as luck or simply a change in mood. We call them good days or bad streaks. But have you noticed the strange consistency in when these streaks occur? The flow usually appears when you are acting on a genuine spark of interest, when you are moving without overthinking. In those moments, the right person calls, the right information surfaces, and obstacles seem to move of their own accord. But then a specific shift happens. The moment the path becomes real, the moment you decide to truly commit to that excitement, the friction arrives. Suddenly, the very idea that felt like a breakthrough yesterday feels like a burden today. You feel a heavy internal resistance that seems to argue against your own joy. We often misinterpret this as a warning from reality. We assume the universe is telling us no. Yet, if you look back at your history, you'll find this cycle repeats almost perfectly. The doubt doesn't target your mistakes, it targets your highest potential. This repetition suggests something deeper than mere coincidence. It points toward a hidden structure in how your consciousness interacts with the physical world.
This is where the experience begins to make sense. We have been taught to view excitement as nothing more than a fleeting emotional state. We treat it like a luxury or a distraction from the real work of life. But in reality, this signal is much simpler than we have been led to believe. This feeling of excitement is actually a sophisticated communication from your deeper self. It is a biological frequency, a resonance that tells you exactly which path is most aligned with your true nature. When you feel that spark, you aren't just having an idea. You are experiencing a literal alignment with a more expanded version of your reality. This reveals something important about how reality works. The sensation of excitement is a navigation system, acting as a compass that points toward the next logical step in your evolution. We often overlook this because it feels too simple to be true. We assume guidance must be complicated or hard-won. Yet the signal has always been present, operating quietly beneath the noise of your daily thoughts. But if excitement is a perfect compass, we must ask a vital question. Why would your mind create so much doubt the moment you decide to follow it? This is the hidden rule behind the experience. Imagine your reality is like a radio. At any given moment, you are tuned to a specific frequency. Excitement is not just a feeling, it is the dial that shifts you toward a different station. When you act on that spark, You are literally changing the frequency of your experience. This explains why the pattern behaves this way. On this new station, the music is different, meaning the people you meet and the opportunities you encounter are already part of that higher vibration. But here is the mechanism many people overlook. Your doubt is actually a biological reaction to the shift itself. When you change your frequency, you are essentially leaving the old station behind. This causes an immediate friction because your current identity is built on the old frequency. It is like trying to listen to two stations at once. The doubt is simply the static that occurs during the transition. Suddenly, the pattern makes sense. The resistance you feel isn't a sign that you are on the wrong path. It is a sign that you are successfully changing the channel. This mechanism has been operating in your life the entire time, quietly managing the transition between the version of you that is and the version of you that is becoming. If the mechanism is this simple, we must ask why it feels so difficult to follow. This is where many of us lose the signal. We have been conditioned to believe that life should be hard, and that anything that comes from a place of joy must be irresponsible. This is the moment the inner voice begins to argue. It dresses itself in the language of maturity. We often mistake this inner resistance for wisdom or responsibility.
We tell ourselves we are being realistic when we are actually just being afraid. How many times has caution silenced the signal of excitement in your life? This obstacle is not a lack of ability, but an attachment to a version of yourself that feels safe in the predictable. When you ignore the spark, you aren't being smart, you are simply choosing the frequency of stagnation. The momentum disappears because you have essentially told your internal navigation system that you don't trust the destination. This is the moment excitement gets replaced by a heavy, familiar caution. Have you ever noticed yourself doing this? If you've experienced these moments of talking yourself out of your own light, I'm curious to hear how that inner dialogue sounded for you in the comments. Transitioning from doubt to alignment doesn't require a dramatic life overhaul. It begins with a simple, consistent method of response. This is how the signal becomes action. To begin navigating, you simply look at the options available to you right now. Notice which one carries even a tiny spark of more excitement than the others. Then act on that specific option to the best of your ability. Follow the thread as far as it naturally goes, without forcing it to be something more. This is where the navigation begins. The key is to release any attachment to what the outcome should look like. If you insist on a specific result, you are back in the frequency of control and doubt.
This formula works best when followed with curiosity rather than pressure. It is an experiment in trust. By acting on the highest excitement in every moment, you are effectively telling your internal navigation system that you are ready for the next level of alignment. This is how the shift in timeline actually starts. How different would a day feel if you followed the signal instead of the fear? What small excitement have you been ignoring recently? If this perspective resonates with you, consider subscribing for more explorations into how consciousness and reality interact. The change rarely starts with something dramatic. It usually appears as a quiet, almost irrelevant curiosity. Imagine you are working on a routine task when you suddenly feel a small impulse to visit a bookstore or send a brief message to an old colleague. Your mind immediately offers a reason to stay put, labeling the impulse as a distraction. But this is often how the shift begins. If you follow that small spark, you might find yourself standing in an aisle where you overhear a conversation that provides the exact solution to a problem you've been facing for weeks.
Or perhaps that message leads to a spontaneous coffee meeting where a new opportunity is revealed. These moments aren't accidents. They are the mechanism of alignment in action. You have likely experienced similar moments before and dismissed them as mere coincidence. But when you look closer, you can see the chain reaction.
A small curiosity led to a small action, which shifted your frequency just enough to encounter a new possibility. The signal usually appears in these small, ordinary moments, hiding in plain sight. Have you ever followed a small curiosity that led somewhere completely unexpected? How many times has a tiny decision changed the entire direction of your day? This suggests something remarkable about the nature of reality. We tend to think of our lives as a single fixed line moving through time. But the mechanism of excitement reveals a different structure. Suddenly, the pattern reveals a deeper meaning. It implies that every version of your life already exists as a potential frequency. You aren't creating a new life through effort. You are simply choosing which version to tune into. In this light, doubt takes on a different role. It is the friction that occurs when you are standing on the threshold of a different version of yourself. This changes the way we understand the experience. Your highest excitement is not just a pleasant feeling. It is a biological echo from a reality that is already occurring. It is a signal from a future self that has already navigated the path you are currently considering. Could these signals be guiding us toward versions of ourselves we have not yet explored? You may already be standing at the threshold of this realization in your own life. Every time you feel that spark, you are touching a parallel possibility.
The doubt you feel is merely the evidence of how close you are to the shift. Perhaps the signal has been there all along, waiting quietly behind the noise of your expectations. The next time you feel that sudden spark of interest, followed by the heavy weight of doubt, remember that you aren't witnessing a failure of logic. You are witnessing the mechanism of change itself. Sometimes the shift begins simply by noticing that the friction is part of the process. In the coming days, you may find yourself observing these patterns in moments you once considered ordinary. The way an idea arrives, the way the mind argues, and the way reality seems to respond when you choose to lean into the light. How often have these signals appeared quietly in your life, only to be dismissed? If you are curious about the deeper mechanics behind this resonance, the video appearing on screen dives into the mystery of what happens when you consistently follow the thread. This is only the beginning of understanding the landscape of your own potential.